I assume we'll have more people coming, but let's not wait any longer. Let's go ahead and begin, Kelly.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here in space with you for this community session. We have about 90 minutes or so to spend time answering any questions that might have come up for you, or any other work that you might be doing on your own that you want to share, thoughts you might be having. And then we can spend time towards the end talking about next time and the homework for next time. So I'll hand the mic back to you all. And if there's something you want to say or ask or share, this is a space for you all to be able to talk with one another about the work we're doing together.
I'll take an opportunity to start us off, if I may. Can I be heard?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. So Ramananda knows I watched the podcast interview with Ashoka this afternoon, and I read some of the other articles that we were asked about or advised. And I was very, very moved by this talk today. It made me feel some interesting dichotomy of like really despondent. Actually, that's the predominant one, where I felt like, this is such a huge thing. And I'm at a certain age where I can only participate in such a way, and I'm watching this youthful movement take place. And that was the inspiring part, actually. So that's the dichotomy. While I felt despondent, as I'm sure, like even in that talk today, they were talking about stages that you go through of your consciousness becoming more and more aware of what's actually happening and what's we're really doing on the planet and how we feel about that. And the comment was made, we're not going to save the planet is going to be fine, but we may be able to save humanity and make it into an inhabitable place, regardless, for some survivors that will then have to forge a new way. And that enormity of all of that, and the human drama and suffering that is inevitable, is just overwhelming to me. Absolutely, completely overwhelming. I'm a little weakened because I had an accident last week on my bike, and I'm recuperating from that. So it was very powerful stuff. And I'm just feeling, I'm very, very excited to witness the inspiration and the terminology. And I see it's like a whole nother mentality of a generation that's coming up with this new language that's internet based, and the way they're describing themselves as not just an individual but part of a collective consciousness that's intended to make this change or work with the change. Thank you. I wanted to start us off.
Thank you so much for that. I hope that you are healing from your bicycle accident. And just for clarity, the things I sent weren't for today, but it's great if you watch them already.
Wow.
They're more to like ground our conversation for our next time, but that's fine.
Oops.
Just like you can listen to. I've actually listened to that interview that I sent you all probably like 3 or 4 times now. So it's a thing to listen to multiple times if you have the capacity. And what I'll say is I actually found that episode and about 3 more of the episodes around it good medicine for myself, because I actually was feeling a little dragged along in a current of just like grief about the world, because it just feels very much, I guess, like it has always felt, but I'm feeling particularly like sensitive to it lately. And I mean, it's rooted in a lot of different things for me personally, but also just as another human on the planet. It's like climate change, right? I've heard the terminology since probably I was in middle school. I was raised in the 80s and 90s. And so we already had talked about like global warming when I was a child. And so now I'm a full adult, approaching middle age, and I have young children, and we're not like at a point where we can just like casually talk about it. This is like a thing that's impacting all of us. I mean, you all just experienced torrential rains that people lost their lives and like all of this damage. And they're saying this is only going to get worse. All that to say, I was kind of like, what are we doing? Like, why are we even sending our children to school? Why are we working? Like, I was like really in a space of this, of like, why are we even watching like casual television? Like, we are in an emergency. And listening to that episode along with another one about imagining what happens next, like what happens when we imagine on the other side of like a zombie apocalypse. It was basically an episode about that. And they both were really good medicine for me, and just being first reminded that multiple people, critical mass of people, see the necessity of change and are engaged in that, so I can know that change is on the way. And it kind of rooted me in my practice around non-attachment, of saying and believing that my like own personal dharma is right action and connection to liberation of all people, and particularly other Black people. And so like I just need to focus on the steps that are in front of me, the things that I have planned that are connected to that, versus thinking that my one action, my one workshop is going to change the whole world. It's like it's our collective action. And so like let me be connected to that versus, you know, what's on television, what's actually what I say casually, like in personal conversation, is like it rooted in me in what is real versus what is not real. Not saying that all the things that are happening that are terrible all over the world aren't real, but they're being driven by something that's not real. And so it rooted me in both of those episodes, rooted me in like, okay, let me remember what's real, where I can shift things, where I can focus my energy, because I don't control so much of what is occurring, but I can control, like, for instance, clean water and food access for 100 other people.
And also the envisioning part that was contained in that, which is what you're talking about, envisioning that we've already actually lived through the apocalypse. It's here. And now we're dealing with the aftermath and trying to make it right. That was a point that was made.
Right.
So that was so positive to just shift it into exactly what I can do, and that other people are also in this consciousness, the youth.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Right. Thank you, Stan, for bringing that to the conversation.
I can speak a little.
Yeah, sure.
What I found useful is to continue to look at the yama and niyama, and the I forget those, what they're called, those poster boards.
Jam boards.
The jam boards,
The jam
yeah.
boards, yep.
And reflect on them. I keep thinking that what I feel like I've been getting from this course and from some books I've been reading is some real education. But I feel like I want to formulate some action steps that we can promote our whole community. So it's more than just educating ourselves, but we find ways to actually take steps. Because I think unless it becomes a part of our the way that we do things, I'll give an example in a minute, it just remains something that we talk about. And Snehan and I talked briefly about this earlier today. It's something I've been thinking about a lot is how we consume is one thing that I think we can do something about. So I've been thinking about that a lot, like what the Institute buys and where do we buy from? Who are we supporting? You know, what kind of labor goes into what we're buying? You know, we've tried to be mindful about plastic and packaging and things like that. But I think in a kind of very easy, superficial way, we haven't looked very deep. We don't really research the working conditions of the companies that we buy from, or the products that we use. So that was one thing that occurred to me, that and not just that the Institute could be more mindful of it, but we could bring that to the awareness of our community. And like that, we need to find ways to share with our whole community actual things that we can all be doing. Now that's what's come to my mind, and I've been jotting down ideas that I'll be looking at with our staff.
I heard you, and give me one moment. I have to give directions to a 9-year-old.
It's okay. It's okay. No problem. Yeah. Amazon.
Yeah,
Amazon. That's just,
yeah,
that's one of the examples that's driving me crazy is Amazon. It's so economical, it's so convenient,
yeah.
but I don't feel good about supporting Amazon. Just one
Thank you.
example.
Sorry about that. I heard your conversation too. It's the same. It's a very tricky thing, deciding where we're going to send our money. And I think it's so amazing that y'all are thinking about that. It's something that I decided to really take a look at in a real way starting in 2019 because I traveled somewhere and essentially a lot of our trash in terms of clothing trash and other reusable plastic trash is dumped there, and it's single use or double use there, like clothes that we give to Goodwill or Salvation Army are packaged and then shipped to these other places. And I had seen a documentary about it, and then I actually saw it with my own eyes, and I was feeling terrible, but not terrible enough to do about anything about it immediately. But last year, I made a commitment in the summertime that I would not buy any more new clothes. I have plenty of clothes, more clothes than I need, actually clothes here in Jersey and clothes in another state, so that I don't have a need for anything unless it's I need work boots because I work on the land, but I'm not just gonna buy things because I think they're pretty or I like them, which is a huge shift for me to even say to people recently, I know it's my birthday, don't buy me anything. I don't want any jewelry, I don't want bracelets, I don't want anything because I don't need it. And I don't feel good about what happens to it when I don't want it anymore. And even though that might not seem like it's connected to racial justice, it very much is because they're not packaging and bottling up our clothes and sending them to Sweden or the UK, or they are sending them to South America, the Caribbean, the continent of Africa, like to the islands in in Pacific Ocean. These are the places that are receiving our trash clothes, and that's predominantly where Black and brown people are housed and live and are native to. And so it's all connected. It's something for us to think about, even around single-use plastics. And I'm sure that San Francisco has the same as New York City, many dry good stores where you can bulk buy beans and pasta and rice and bread and all these things, and package free. But I made a commitment for myself to start shopping in that way. And a lot of people come to me to talk about food and what they should make and what they can do with things. And I'm I have to figure out a way when people ask me a recipe to advocate for them to not purchase the pasta in a plastic bag and have a conversation with people, because yeah, me having a conversation doesn't change it, right? It doesn't make them go and do the thing. But if we all are not having at least conversations with one another about it, you can assume this person's never going to hear about it unless you're the one who brings it up for them. And this makes a difference, just as much as creating some big project that gets millions and billions of dollars to handle a problem. Does that make sense to y'all? These are tangible things that are equally as important as any large scale direct action engagement activism, because it really is ongoing work that we're all going to be doing for the rest of our lives. And I mean, part of like the overwhelm that I mentioned when I answered was talking about what's Snehan about their sharing is knowing that there are things that we damage that we will not be able to like dial back in terms of water and the air and the soil and the animals that are extinct. And also, you know, I don't know if y'all saw last week, there's a fox. They thought the fox has been extinct for 50 years, and then the fox is just walking around out in the world. So the world, like the podcast said, the world will be fine. But will we be able to be here on the earth? And we've got to do something about that. It's like small things and big things.
Kelly, what did you just gave an example last week? Something? What is it? I missed what you said.
Yeah, there was a fox that they thought was extinct. I'll have to like find the article. It like
Okay.
my news comes up in a particular way, like nature news and space news, and it came up that there's a fox. They thought this fox had been extinct for 50 years. There's
Okay,
not been
okay.
any proof of it. No one's seen it, and then all of a sudden, here it is walking around. And I mean, there's other animals that I've seen noodles articles about, like even, you know, during the pandemic, they said like there were things that were on the brink of extinction that like because we weren't traveling in the same way, using in the same way, moving around in the same way, they had an opportunity to like repopulate. And so like everything's not repaired, but there is definitely something we as, you know, individuals could be doing, but especially as community, right? You have 10 people, 11 people here on this call. You 11 people make a big difference when you all make a singular commitment to at least continue a conversation with yourselves and each other and your bigger community. This makes a huge difference. And that's more important and more sustainable than just getting mad every time something bad happens and raging about it on your social media platform and then continuing to consume in the same way that you do or not engage real conversations about what's happening to people who are, you know, not you, but also they are you. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad y'all are having conversations away from the space, and I hope that the resources that are being provided do like lead you to other resources that you uncover on your own. Are there other thoughts about what you've been talking about, what we've talked about in other times, or maybe some resources you've come across that you'd want to share with others? Ideas you're having about the conversation we're having?
I would. I'm not feeling the best today, so I'm not sure that I should be talking, but I just want to say that Ramananda and some of us have been trying to get everyone more involved in this whole issue and started an organization called Spiritual Action Initiative. And you can find it at spiritualactioninitiative.com or .org, .org. And I would just say that, Kelley, you're really so compelling, and the examples that you give and the way that you present and the resources that you give us, and it just is really, I think, helping us all think this through more fully and realizing the true impact of it. And so I would just hope that maybe this can be a way for our community to gather around, and maybe it's not through Spiritual Action Initiative. I just would like to know what this community would find helpful to address this and what we could do to engage. And like Ramanandaji said about action, we need to come up with not just thinking and reading and feeling, you know, the feeling part of it, sometimes it just kind of stops me cold. Because I'm just so despondent about it all. But to feel like we're addressing it as a group, like you're saying, there's 11 people here, so we're going to have more impact than just I would, or just Ramananda would, or you would. And I would hope that this is a place where we can really gather ourselves together and start figuring out what we can do and what direction we want to move in. That's
I thank you for being here and for your feedback, like on the facilitation I'm doing. I think, I've shared with y'all before that I'm stopping doing this work, not because I don't think that this work is important or that it should be happening. I just don't think I should be doing it anymore. And that guided in part by feeling frustrated, I guess, because what often happens is I'll work with a group like this. And while I don't have an attachment to what should happen, I do have an attachment that something should happen. And I could, and I have talked with many people about lowering my expectation that something should happen. And I actually refuse to release that particular attachment. I because then what is the point in me going through long drawn out work with people around things like this? Because it's like we are having an intellectual conversation about a very real experience that happens to be my experience. And so it's not just a conversation for me. So I can't have it with people accepting that it will just be a conversation for them. And so I think it's great that y'all are thinking about action. And what I would say is there's no wrong action except inaction. Because the reality is you're all humans, and I'm sure as your community has seen over and over again, mistakes are made. Harm happens to people. It's really not avoidable. It's unavoidable that harm is going to happen when humans are interacting with one another. Can you build a container where you handle harm in a way that makes everybody feel cared for and valued? Yes. Has that been difficult in a system of capitalism? It has. Y'all have already learned that. So it's really just a matter of, can you apply the wisdom you have from working together for a long time to work together in a way that decenter something that I'm sure many of you didn't even recognize you were holding when you came together initially. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I can say that many of you are in the same age range, generation as my own parents. And so you might have had similar and very different experiences. Both of my parents are Black people living in America on the East Coast, but predominantly in the South. And I can know what you might have seen, did see, witnessed happening in the world, because my parents also did, and they chose to make it a central conversation for me as a kid, right? That leads us to me being here to facilitate with you all. But also it leads to y'all being here in the space. And so there is wisdom, even if you were quote unquote not on the right side of history or neutral or on the right side, you have this wisdom in history that is important, right? And connected to how you identify and how the world sees you. That's going to be pivotal in using whatever action y'all choose to be a part of change, to help usher in change, and really to lean into the responsibility of creating a container where people can experience wholeness so they're not afraid to experience it elsewhere. Because I think I said it to y'all, this work really is about everybody having the right to be whole and exist in their wholeness, including white people. Whiteness keeps you from being a whole person also, because you have to either sit idly by or willingly participate in the oppression of other people. And you should not want that for yourself. You should want to be able to support the thriving of other people. And like I said to you also, I think that is easier for you all to conceptualize because of the practice that you chose. It's the practice literally centers respecting and caring for all living things, the planet included. And so no one has to like give you a value around that. There are people who actually do not value that. You all already value that. So it's just what action is going to help us honor that in a world that doesn't honor that. We can't be silent. We can't be neutral about it. We have to like be in action. Our practice actually demands that we are in action. I was recently watching this video. I watch a lot of Democracy Now! I'm not sure if you all watch that channel. I think that news is what news is. And so I like to try to get news from places where they're like letting the people who are impacted have a voice versus the commentators talking. Point is, on Democracy Now! They were interviewing a scientist who's like a well-known researcher who was fired from this prestigious institution because she and another scientist went into the largest like scientist conference in the world, and they held up a banner that said, "Out of the lab into the streets." That's all they did. They just walked on the stage and like they were introducing someone, and they ran on stage and they opened this banner and screamed out like, "We have to get out of the labs. We have to get into the streets. We know what's happening to the world. We have a responsibility, obligation." They were arrested, kicked out, lost their credentials. They can never come to this conference again. And she lost her job. And she was saying like, it feels devastating to lose my job. And also it frees me up to be in the street, first of all. And I am literally being paid billions of dollars to research money to find out why the world is ending and how we can like stop it. She was using that particular language. And then you want me to not say anything to people, and I'm the person who's like the expert in this. And my partner and I were watching it together, but it made me think like all of us need to be in the streets, whatever that looks like. Meaning like we all need to be having multiple conversations a week about racial justice. If you teach a class and you have 2 people there, this is your opportunity to have a conversation about racial justice, climate emergency, single-use plastics, clean water, like whatever the topic is that you're deciding to focus on. And that is going to create discomfort for people. And you still have a responsibility to do it, particularly as a space holder, because people are a willing audience. And so how do you talk about the fact that our practice asks us to honor these particular principles? And I can't do that without saying to you, people are being murdered in Peru because they want justice. And that's happening right now while we're practicing yoga. I have a printout for y'all at the end of class where I'm sending an email to everybody who registered with links of how to learn more and what you can do right now. That might seem like a small action, but like today, I said it to 3-4 people on a Zoom who didn't know anything about what was happening in Peru, and they needed to know. It doesn't change what's happening in Peru. And also, the more people who can know, there's a critical mass of us saying we'd like to be experiencing life differently, the more we can remember our collective power. Our individual power is collective power. And I'm saying all of this really because in our next time, it is a time for you all to make some solid agreements together, or at least solid agreements to discuss together in an ongoing way about what is sustainable for your community. And what it looks like for you to like use the space that you've cultivated to, let people open their perspectives or learn more or question more, right? And you could do that through a bunch of different ways, but also what does it look like for you all to be in solidarity with the local communities around you that are bearing the brunt of climate disasters, racial oppression, other types of oppression, poverty, like what does it mean for you all to be actively engaged in solidarity? Not charity work, which we're going to talk about the difference between that next time, but it's like real solidarity of, an example that I can like think of within your own community, which I don't know how it turned out, but I just happened to be at Yogaville one time leading a retreat, and there was a meeting that was supposed to happen between the local community and Yogaville because there was a pipeline that was coming through and it was going to really like impact both areas really a lot. And it was really great to witness them in that particular instance, not necessarily forcing their voice, but backing up these other people who were going to be more impacted than they are. And so it's like, there's so many things that I see that come out of San Francisco and California in general, that there is the space for your spiritual action network or you as a collective community to not go in and say like, well, we're going to offer you this, but to go in and say, we have bodies and we have time. Would you like for us to use it in solidarity with you? What would be the best way for us to be in service to you, which is different than saying like, well, you know, like we offer meditation, so y'all can come and take meditation for free from us. And it's like, that's not what we need right now. We need food, or we need like white people to stand in front of us while we protest to keep our bodies safe. We need you to make lines in front of us and I'm just giving you examples of things. And there's actually an organization, they're here in New York, called White Noise. Have you all heard of them before? You could look them up in your free time. But they are a group of white people here in New York who organize around supporting the organizing efforts of Black-led and non-white organizations. And so they do things like cook all the food when there's a gathering that is in care and support of Black people, or like they set up all the chairs and do all the cleanup after the event is over. But they also do it from a space of they don't interject themselves in the day. So they don't speak, they don't do anything. They just come and do the work that they're supposed to do and create this space for, like, for instance, there's a Black-led organization here in New York called Harriet's Apothecary, and they are a healing network of mostly Black and trans and queer people. And they offer these free healing pop-ups. I put it in the chat. And so White Noise will come and make all the meals, set it up, serve all the meals, do all the cleanup. So the healers can just focus on providing service and care to the people who are coming to the free healers village. I'm sharing it just for you all to know that there's many ways for you to engage in being in solidarity, right? Even around like, for a long time, I was part of something and we needed a place to meet. And there was a person who like really wanted to be involved in our work, but we actually didn't. It was a group of Black women and we were like, we don't want a white woman's voice as a part of what we're creating. So maybe there's another way that you can support us. And the way she did that was gave us meeting space for 3 years for free. She owned a space. It met the needs that we had for a meeting. She didn't charge us to use the space. And oftentimes she like made us a little cool snack to have while we were meeting. And that was her like support, but like she wouldn't be in the space. She would have already dropped it off. Like she kept the space clean for us, like these particular things. And I'm just giving you ideas because you all do have space.
No, it's a good example for us. We do have space and we have more than we need, so we can offer something like that. And I think that's what we need. We need concrete ideas that.
And it's from the space too of you all can make it sustainable for yourselves. There are plenty of grants that are available to people who own space to say like, we're running program, and to pay some, like for instance, you all are a yoga studio, you have access to props. I don't know if you all have Black teachers regularly in the studio that are on the schedule. Perhaps you do. And also maybe you don't have a Black, queer, and trans teacher on staff. And Black, queer, and trans people need access to yoga. So you'd have a responsibility of finding out who is the person offering it, because it's likely that there is someone already doing that work. And it's the space of saying, how do we stand in solidarity with you? Is it that we take up money for you? Is it that we offer you our space at this time every week for free? And also, do you want us to get a grant to be able to pay you to teach this class? Because it's likely that they're teaching it for free or donation based or on some other grant cycle. And I'll say, as a person who organizes healing spaces for Black people, the main hindrance around doing that work is all the hoops you have to jump through to get grant money. It takes up an amazing amount of my time each week, just answering 25 of the same questions over and over again. And while I have to do it because of I'm in a nonprofit and that's what we agreed to do in making it, part of why we do it is so that we can just pay other Black people to do the work that they want to do versus us thinking it's our job to do that. Like we have a eating disorder group that is only for Black people. It's a peer-led group, but the space is held by 3 psychologists that are specialized in eating disorders who happen to be Black. For a long time, they did it on donation basis online, and then they had a nonprofit that was funding it, and then suddenly they cut their funding. We are a nonprofit already. So part of the work we do is to secure funding so that we can pay them a very good rate to host this space, because it's very stressful and time consuming. And you all could be doing that for others too. There's many different options. And, like some people will say like, I think y'all are nonprofit, right? It's like you can fiscally sponsor other groups and collectives who are not nonprofits who do work you believe in. The general way of doing that in the nonprofit industrial complex is for you to charge a fee to those people for being their fiscal sponsor. It's so wrong to me. So like we fiscally sponsor a lot of things, but we don't take a fee off of the top. It could, I guess, benefit us, but then it takes away from the thing that we said we believed in. So we just don't do it. And I'm sharing that to say, like, as you explore options, there will be models that come up for you of ways to do things. And it's great to research and see how a thing is being done, particularly if it's popular. And also it behooves you to question who benefits that model. And really hold that the solution to what we're all experiencing doesn't exist yet. If it did, we would not be experiencing this. So we're going to have to think very expansively. And even when we think we got an answer, we need to pay attention to how that answer lands and see if there's even more room for us to expand what we envisioned. Which, is going to make it perpetual work. And also, you all sit in a very critical space for your lineage, because what you all decide to do now is what determines how your lineage navigates this new, amazing frontier that we're approaching. I'm trying to change my language about it so I'm not so depressive when I talk.
I'm going to take another opportunity here in the silence to say I'm interested in culture and how this is an aspect of the work that's being done. Not just cultural appropriation, but cultural value. And if I can still partake of cultural activities that I enjoy that seem exclusive, like specifically, I'm thinking of, we'd like to go to the symphony. We went to the symphony, I think last week, and there's, even somebody said, I heard somebody say, this classical music of the symphony is not for poor people. And that just hit me. I was like, wow, first of all, I can't say that. And if that's true, that's my question. So again, I'm uncomfortable going to the symphony because I don't see Black people there. Why?
I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons why, right? Because it's expensive to go to the symphony. And while there are plenty of Black people who can afford to go to the symphony if they want to, there's also other places for Black people to spend their money that they might like better than going to the symphony. And so what I'll say is I think that it's important for all of us to, when we enjoy a thing and we feel welcomed in the space, to be questioning the decision makers in that space about why it's not accessible to everyone. So it's like, if you're a member of the symphony, let's just say, or you on the board for the symphony, or your friend is on the board for the symphony, you have a responsibility to ask them, like, how many tickets do you give away? And how are those tickets given away and disseminated? And maybe they have a great program that you just didn't know about, right? It's like most people that have never received SNAP benefits don't know that you can get into most museums for free if you have a SNAP card. The problem is most people with SNAP work during the hours that museums are open. So, but it, they don't care about that. It's just there. If you can get off for between 9 and 5 during the week, you can come to this museum for free. The point is that like benefit is there, and I'm sure someone has advocated for that benefit to be in place. You can be that person for the thing that you love. You can be the person to ask, why is this not available? Why is this not more accessible? And maybe you have the tools and planning ability to help them implement a new way of being. And even that might not land correctly. And then you can have the responsibility of helping them, if you choose to, examine a new way to make it more accessible.
Thank you for that. And the broader question about culture. Did you
I
understand what I
think
was sort
that,
of alluding?
yeah, well, what it brought to my mind is just that, particularly here in the US, and I know not everyone in your community is from the US, and also we're all living in the US in this particular moment, there is this like segmenting of culture that feels like a way to keep us from recognizing that we all have a lot of like similarities around music. Not that the music is the same, but we all have music. We all have food, we all have dancing, we all have all of these different joy practices that are similar and different. We all have cultures that come from practices of connecting the mind and the body through breath and movement, just showed up in different ways. And when you don't know, it's easy to other something, to think it's weird, to view it as subpar or less than. And so, like, a part of the work that you can be in is like, no, you can't spend every day just uncovering whiteness and how to disrupt it and learning about the history of the world while also learning about culture. And also, every time the opportunity presents itself, you can take yourself to the maximum around it. It's like this summer, my friend played a song for me on the beach. I really loved the song a lot. It was super great. I asked her to send me the album on Spotify. It sent me down a rabbit hole to listen to the band's music because it was an old album. The band has a very interesting name. It is Filipino. The name of the band is Filipino, but the people in the band appear to be a Black person and 2 white people. However, they named their band Filipino because a Filipino word, because they all love Filipino funk music. I read it in an article where they were interviewed, and I was like, I never even thought about funk music in another country. And I freaking love Filipino funk music. It's so my jam. It's really great music. And this does not teach me everything about Filipino culture. And it reminds me that like I actually was raised on funk. That's the music my parents like listened to in their teens and young adulthood. And across the world, punk music was having a separate but connected evolution in the Philippines. And we can all be like uncovering this at all times. It's like the benefit you all also have is that you live in a very diverse environment. Not everyone in America is having that experience. And so it's like, I feel fortunate that I live in close proximity to New York City, even though it's only been a short amount of time, because I am a naturally curious person. And also, I have access to so much art on such a consistent basis of so many different representations and ideas and interpretations that I'll go see anything. It does not have to be of particular interest to me. I just want to see. I want to see what other people have made. I want to read about other people's experiences. And it's like sparking that particular curiosity in yourself in the like small ways you can. And I mean, something that my grandpa said to me in 2006, probably like 6 months before he died. He was born in 1912. And the internet was like a thing, but not the way it is now. And I was showing him, he was asking me, how do I know what happens in the world if I don't get the newspaper? He was staying at my house. And I was like, I don't get the newspaper. And he was like, how are we supposed to know what happened in the world yesterday if you don't get the newspaper? And I didn't have a TV at the time. And I was like, well, we can just look on the internet. And it sent us down a full day rabbit hole of me showing him how to use the internet. Basically, it blew his mind that he could like read any paper that he wanted to from where he was. Point is, we're at the place where like, whatever you see, whatever you have a question about, you can look it up right now. So just do that and save it for a later study. That's what I do all the time. I use the notes in my phone as a place to just save things, as well as Pinterest, which some of you might be familiar with that site. I have whole boards of things that I just want to learn more about. And when I have the time, I go and look at it. When the question comes back up for me, I go and look at it. It's all like neatly organized. And that might not be a system for you, but like when you are feeling overwhelmed by what you're experiencing in the world, even that small action is a part of you disrupting the thing that you're experiencing. Does that make sense? It's very easy to get sucked into just like what's happening here in the US. Terrible things are happening here all the time, every day, every minute. And also terrible things are happening outside of our country, outside of our hemisphere, all over the globe. And so are wonderful things. And you deserve the space to learn about as much as you can so that it can inform the decisions you make and the stories that you're holding about other people, which are mostly subconscious stories, right? Right. There's a channel, I just started watching this on YouTube. It's called Second Thought. I want to preface it by saying, I'm not saying that I believe or agree with everything that they share on this channel. And also they have 15 to 20-minute art videos that explain complex systems in a very digestible way. And so, you know, I try to watch like maybe one or two a week.
What's it called
Usually
again?
they have Second Thought. I just put it in the chat.
Okay.
Yep, Second Thought. It's a young person who used to make science videos, and now he feels the urgency of having real conversations about what we can do to change the world. And like I said, he has his own particular perspective, but he's on point in terms of education. So it's a great tool for you to at least be curious about certain things. Like he had a really great video about the whitewashing of Black history, particularly people like Martin Luther King. And, you know, like that's a great place to start. I'm like, what do you mean the whitewashing of Martin Luther King? And it's like, he was not a beloved figure until about 25 years ago. Like this person was hated and despised and not popular even amongst Black people. So this like whitewashing of his message is purposeful. It's not an accident that they want you to think he was this like docile, turn the other cheek person who like thought integration was great. And, you know, sometimes when I say that, people are like, but no. And I'm like, but I was raised by people who were members of the NAACP at that time, who were organizing alongside him. And I'm telling you, the version that you learn about in school is not the version that my grandparents taught me about. My grandparents were fearing for their lives all the time, along with tons of other Black people. And so like, he wasn't a beloved like figure. It's why the FBI was following him for his whole life. It's why he's not here anymore. And so that particular, I'm saying all that to say that particular episode was very like, oh man, everybody needs to watch this one. Because more than it being about Martin Luther King, it's about the way that American history in particular is fed to Americans to create a narrative that continues oppression. And I think we talked about it last time in terms of understanding how capitalism is connected to oppression. And this particular channel does a really good job of explaining it in a way that is digestible, even if you're not like, I'm not an economy person. I actually like laugh sometimes when people try to like break it down to me. I'm like, I am not about to learn this made up system. There's no benefit to me understanding how made up money moves through a made up system. And that's not to say that it's not important for some people to understand. It's not the best use of my energy to understand it because I don't wish to participate in it. And I'm saying that to say, if you're a person like me who's like, well, how does that work? This channel does a really great job of talking about it in a way I think is digestible. But I'm not saying I agree with everything he says.
That, in particular, that last thing you're sharing is how capitalism supports racism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's a hard conversation to have in America because we're socialized to dedicate our lives to capitalism and people believe in it. And I'm not saying that you can't believe in it. I'm just saying who benefits from us believing in it. And that part feels not like something I want to participate in. And sometimes people say like, well, then what's the other solution, Kelly? I'm like, I don't know because I've never not lived under capitalism. But I also know we won't get an opportunity to experience it if we don't question it. And not from the place of like we pick another monetary system that already exists, but from the place of we literally can make something else if we all choose to that does not yet exist. We're going to have to make a way of being with one another that does not yet exist because all the other ways that we've come up with cause harm. And I choose to believe that we as humans could come up with a different way, return to a different way. Maybe like in, 400 years or something, but still. Which that again, that emergent strategy podcast, the second episode that I talked about, the one where the person talks about imagining what's on the other side, it's like, and I think I've said this to you all before, like part of the rub of systems for everyone involved, regardless of your identity, is that it robs us of thinking about things outside of what's already presented to us as right, best, and good. And so we get stuck in like, well, this is how it's always been done. So how are we going to disrupt it? And it's like, there's so much about our lives right now in 2023 that we could have never imagined being possible in whatever year. Like, I blow my 9-year-old's mind when I say like the internet did not exist when I was your age, or at least I didn't have access to it. The public didn't have access to it when I was 9 in 1989 and 1990. We just went to the library, we drove to the library and we got on a little computer or looked through a drawer and we like found the book and their mind is blown. But to me, this is also an example of like the way that we do a thing can change drastically if we all collectively agree to it. It's just that we haven't necessarily been very intentional. We haven't been intentional about what we are agreeing to. But we can be. Y'all give me hope around it.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody else here that's been quiet has a comment or a question. Go ahead, Raisa.
Yeah, I have a comment. I haven't been saying anything, partly because I'm originally from somewhere else, and I've been in several trainings, and at some of those trainings, I've been said that, oh, you are from somewhere else, you can't understand how it actually is. And I'm like, yes, I understand that, but I can still try to sit in the trainings and try to incorporate the information in. And then I actually had this is a little bit longer story, if I may. I had after the Yama and Niyama, what we did last time, I was thinking about it because it's a little bit frustrating if you feel like you can't do anything. And then I was coming from work and I was going to the train station And I saw that there were a group of young men, high schoolers probably, gathering, kind of making almost like a mob. They were all seemed like all backgrounds, all colors of young men, about 10 probably. And I stopped there and I was looking, I was like, something is not right here. And I kept watching, and then they started actually kind of doing a ring, and then two of the guys started to fight, like really go for it. And I kept looking, and I was like, there was an agent there doing nothing. And I was like, okay, something needs to be done here. And I just walked there and said like, hey, what's going on? And and they were stopping the fighting, two of them, and then the guys who were cheering up, they were saying like, oh, this is all cool. And then I just turned to the two guys saying, are you guys okay? Because they were really hitting each other. And if I felt like if I don't interrupt this, something is really going wrong here. And so they stopped, and I just said like, this is not cool. This is not okay what you're doing. And it was 2 p.m. during the day. And then they just left, and they shouted after me like, okay, thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day. And it was actually interesting because I was shaken up about that. But at the same time, I felt like actually doing something. And then I talked with my daughter. I picked her up after school, and I told her about this. And she told me saying like, Mom, you know what? They probably saw you as an older lady and they listened to you. So I felt like, wow, this is my old lady power, which I was using to do something beneficial. I realized this is part of what I can do. So it kind of gave me a little bit peace. Like it doesn't have to be like forming a big organization or giving $1 million to somebody. I can just walk somewhere if I see something and say something and maybe do something like this. So yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that story, Raisa. And I want to say, I don't think that you can't understand what happened just based on what you've shared about your own background and potentially why you're here in the US. I think that this is part of the siloing of people and culture and experiences of not saying like, there are many people who have felt the impact of oppression, and it is many times along race, right? But also it's around class and like perceived cultures, right? Of like, I've never lived in Europe, and I definitely have read enough to know that there's a story of like rich Europe and not rich Europe. And rich Europe does not care at all about the other parts of Europe. And we're watching that play out on a global stage right now between Ukraine and Russia. And so where our like collective power lies is in knowing that like whatever happened in your own childhood in the place that you consider home or your homeland is very much connected to what is happening in Peru, what is happening in Africa, what has happened here in the US to indigenous cultures and Black people. And so like, how can we understand that this system does not, even though it might, someone might look and say like, well, you're an older white woman, so of course you've had privilege. Of course you have. And also it's important for you to be saying, just even to other people who are in your family who have the same or similar experience of like, do you not see how what we experienced and the reasons we had to potentially move, lose out, miss out, shift our lives is very much the same as what I'm witnessing on television for these people who don't look anything like us, who are in a completely different continent, who are in a completely different time. These two things are not separate. And like, that's part of your superpower too, of being able to recognize that I also am impacted by a thing that I also benefit from sometimes. And like, what can I be doing about that? How can I be having, conversations with, I hold that not all children are being raised by what are deemed parents, right? Children are very much in communities of adults. So even if you are not a direct caregiver of children or young people, you're likely in community with them. even if you're just walking past them regularly. It's like there's about 10 children that I see every single day. I don't know their names, but I see them because they're walking in the same direction. They ride the bus with my children. Like, I'm in community with them. And so how can I be teaching them, modeling for them? How can I be having important conversations, stopping fights? How can I be shielding them from police violence as an advocate for them when their parents, like that's happened to me twice as I've been living in Jersey, seeing a young child or what I deem a child being approached by a police officer and no other adult around. I don't know this kid and I'm still about to stand here to advocate for this kid that I don't know, because I also don't know you, police officer, and your uniform doesn't make you safe for me. So it might not be safe for this kid either. And it might be, but it also might not be. So there's no harm in me using my adult privilege to stand here and advocate for you at 12 or 13 or 15. So, you know, it's thinking about all of that too. And I think we've talked about it too, of like, you have people here that you're connected with in terms of your like ashram community, and then you have your expanded out communities, your families, the people you live with and around. And it's like, can you be committed to talking about hard things with them, introducing them to new things, showing them new things, taking them to things that potentially, like, you know, you love the symphony, Snehan, and that's great. I actually like the symphony too. And like, can you be researching symphonies by Black people and demanding that your symphony perform them? Can you be going to other musical performances, right? That maybe culturally seem very different than the symphony, but actually aren't, right? Or these are the ways that we expand ourselves and expand our ability to see and honor people's humanity. It might not seem like a big deal, but it's a big deal. Like, I had to have a whole conversation with my 6-year-old about the founding fathers because that's what they're learning about in school. And y'all know I kept it real. Like, they all own slaves, so I don't care what your teacher says about them being like special. Yeah, they did create a country, and at the same time, they owned people who look like us. So, did they make this place for us, or did they not? And why is the teacher not talking to you about that? Why is she only talking to you about this part of it? Which brings up all kind of things for a 6-year-old. And it's my responsibility as their parent to do that and for them to go to school and potentially, I don't know if they will, well, I know that they did, say something to their teacher about it, because the teacher also may not know that she needs to be considering that as a not Black person teaching at an all Black school. So yeah, to your point, Raisa, it's like, it's small things and large things. It's like, you know, you mentioned you have a daughter and I don't know her age. It's like, I'm sure you've had conversations with her about your life here in the US and your life before you came to the US. And it's making the connection for her that your life before you came to the US, and I'm not making assumptions about it, but like whatever you experienced in your life before you came to the US, maybe influences why you're in the US, but also is connected to, like, you see this thing on the news, this is exactly what I experienced, just in a different time, in a different place, right? And letting her as a young person have her own curiosity about that and having open and honest conversations with her about what you could be doing, what she could be doing.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, in the silence, I'm going to take another opportunity to let you know, my dear friend now, that I'm not only a symphony fan, but I also go to a party in New York that's the oldest dance party that we know of, started in 1973 by a white DJ in Soho for Black and Hispanic dancers. and it's still going on by invitation only. And it meets 4 times a year in New York City. And
That's
it is
super
in
cool.
environments like that. Pardon?
Oh, I was just saying that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's in environments like that that I get this, I don't know. Yeah, you understand. That's where I like to be.
Thank you for sharing it. In the chat, I put a link to that other episode of the Emergent Strategy podcast that I was talking about. I think we've talked about this. The term emergent strategy is based in a book. I know I've read from there too, y'all. And this is just a podcast of them interviewing people who they view as using emergent strategy, which is really just, they explain emergent strategy as like a simplified way to think about complex systems and solutions for those systems. And so they have a bunch of different people from all different backgrounds on there. I think they're in their 2nd or 3rd season of the podcast, but like part of the conversation that you all need to be considering and that we'll talk about next time is what is next for y'all collectively as well as individually. And so, how can you, more than talk about what needs to change, talk about how you want to hold that change before it starts. And this book could be a good tool in helping you think about that, about how you're gonna not just what you want to do to change, but how you're gonna take care of one another in that change. Because that's important too.
That episode in particular, you feel like could be a good resource for us?
Well, no, I think the book could be a good resource for you all. I think the episodes are great. I don't think that their episodes are really geared on like helping you come up with solutions. I generally view them as an invitation to think expansively about particular topics.
Yeah.
Like the one I sent for you all to look at, they're talking about building sustainable change essentially. And then in this episode, they're talking about the balance of feeling maybe scared about what's ahead and what it looks like for you to release that fear and be in more of a trust place that what's ahead is actually great. There might be discomfort on the way to it, but it's great that change is happening. But like they have older episodes. They have an episode around forgiveness that was very like helpful to me because it was about forgiving people that aren't here anymore and the type of ancestor work that we can do to heal a relationship that might be what is considered over in the physical and how it like doesn't end. And that's important, especially for us in terms of, I think what holds sometimes white identifying folks up around this work is having like shame around how their ancestors might have navigated a thing. And it's important for you to be able to heal that story for yourself if you want to release that shame and be in action. Or it's going to keep coming up. So both things. The book would be a good resource. The person who wrote Emergent Strategy, their name is Adrienne Marie Brown. They wrote another smaller book called Holding Change. Also, that is a great, they have a few different books, but those 2 books are great books for groups to read together. To be very intentional about like, okay, we know we want to change some things and we know that's going to be uncomfortable. How do we want to, maybe you all have heard this term before, like, how do we want to be principled in our struggle together, this like change that we're doing? And what are the principles that we're going to like rely on and lean into regardless of the change? Which includes talking about like what happens when harm happens. How do we hold each other accountable? But how do we also take care of one another? How do we make sure that people feel safe making mistakes? Because that doesn't mean they're bad. It just gives them data for what not to do next time. And these things happen to be talked about before you start making changes, or the change won't be sustainable. People won't feel safe to make a change. People won't feel safe to say what they really think and feel and be challenged around that. And so it's important to know, like, yeah, for instance, let's just say you all said, we're going to meet once a month. We're going to read stuff and watch documentaries together. And we're going to meet once a month. And we're going to have real, authentic conversations about our thoughts and feelings. If you don't establish that, like, you can't say the wrong thing here, although something you say might be harmful, this doesn't exclude you from the space. This doesn't mean that we're going to treat you terribly, but we might say to you, I need you to think more expansively around that, or I believe that you can be better around that particular idea. This makes it safer for people to say the wrong things versus everybody being real nice and polite and making sure they don't really say what they feel. And that's, ongoing work for y'all to do together. All right. Of like, well, this is what we're going to do if a racist thing happens. Then it makes it safer for the person who experiences the racism to come forward and say, I'm experiencing racism, because you've already laid out how you're going to take care of them and keep them safe in the future. Even if you don't know exactly, you've laid out that you're going to do something. But also you all need to be committed to the things you agree that you're going to do. Right. It's like, I actually haven't been out of the house this week. I don't, except to like get my children to school, because there's a lot of like protesting happening locally, which I think is important to do. And also I don't want to get swept up in it. I don't have the like emotional capacity as a Black person to walk again around the death of another Black person. It's just too much. So I'm relaxing and resting. And also, like, if y'all have the capacity, you need to go and at least witness what is happening, to hear the voices of people or offer water, or, like in the city that I'm from, they're very strict. They have a lot of policies to be able to arrest people for protesting while also saying we honor free speech. And so, in the middle of 2020, a group of older white people established jail support. They had a table that was right across from where people come out when they get out of jail. And they had clothes there and cell phones and food and water for people and medical care and healers there to just like take care of people after they came out of jail. But also they were steadily raising money to bail people out of jail the whole time. And the police were very hostile at first because there were a lot of Black and brown people working the table. And the white people who were organizing it said, like, okay, the Black people can't be here because they're being harassed. They're not going to harass us because, to your point, right? So like, I'm a little old white lady. And that's exactly what happened. They did not bother them anymore. And so like, this is a space for y'all to like think about and explore for yourself. I'm not saying that's exactly what y'all do. And I'm saying that there's really no wrong action except inaction, or action that you all won't back up. Even, with your local governments. Like, I don't know how your ashram moves around, like engaging political systems, like your local governments, your mayors, your city council people, all those types of things. And also, like, if there's a thing that exists, there's probably inequity in that thing. And if you have knowledge, connection, capacity, time, the bodies, there's no reason for you all not to say, like, we don't know everything that's happening. And also, what do you need from us? Do you need us to make phone calls? Do you need us to write letters? Do you need us to bring things? Do you need us to clean up things? We are available. And just be honest with yourselves, as individuals and an organization about the capacity you have.
Yeah, what I'm starting to think of is some kind of a project or topic theme that we adopt on a monthly basis, that we share with our teachers and that we have our teachers share with the students. This way we bring some issue to light, we educate each other, and then I guess that a second kind of thing would be something like what you're talking about, where we actually organize some kind of project, where we actually go do something together, or serve some group that we invite to come here and make use of our space. But I like the idea of some kind of a monthly theme that we adopt as a community, especially a community of teachers, because that's how we interact with our students.
Right. I mean, that's a great idea because people already trust you and they are coming to you to learn. You really are you have the power, if you want to say that, to control not control, but to offer and
Yeah,
invite people into a more expansive experience. It's like, I'm sure you all send newsletters. I get some from like Gilgal. I don't think I get y'all's newsletter, but like, even in your newsletters, there's nothing preventing you all from creating a running resource list and putting a link to it in every letter that you send, in all of your email signatures. This is completely and totally possible.
good.
You
Good
know,
idea. Writing it
in
down.
terms of, you can't make people in your community or your family engage those resources, and also you can make it easy for them too,
Yeah.
because it's what you'll have to hold, what I have to hold, I'll say, not y'all don't have to hold, but what I have to hold is that what we're talking about won't land for people and they'll be very resistant to it. And I trust the power of the truth to do what it needs to do. So can I just make it accessible to you? And like, so I'll ask the question, like, how can I invite the most people into like a expansive space to think about this? That's the question I'm asking when I share resources with you all. I have my own very firm ideas that may not resonate with you. I'm not here to get you to think like me. I'm just trying to get you to think about, if you actually want to be in this existence in this way, and if you want to allow other people to suffer in the way that they suffer, and do you want to be a part of changing that? And what does that look like for you? That's the whole point of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not for you to feel exactly how I feel. It's not possible. We don't even have the same identity. But can you value how I feel? Sure. Can you understand that everyone's not having the same experience that you might be having, and that is because of race and gender and sexuality and class, and that the more power you're perceived to have, the more responsibility you have to shift that culture, right? And so like I mentioned, like your Congress people or whatever, I don't know what the thing is, but most cities got a thing. I could say it's probably housing where y'all live. And it's like, I'm sure there's tons of people raising their voice about housing. If housing feels important to even one of you, then that one of you should go to them and say, how can we be in solidarity with you? Do we need to ask our entire community to make a letter? Do we need to have a phone bank one night where we're not going to have classes? We're just going to ask all of our students to come in and make calls with us and write letters with us? Because this is also yoga. But not from the space of like, this is what we'll do for you. More from the space of, we can secure 100 people on Wednesdays throughout the day. How would you like us to use these 100 people's time and energy? Yeah. And I think that y'all are all super smart. I've enjoyed getting to know you and spending time with you and learning from you and learning alongside you. So you are completely capable of coming up with a way of taking action. And y'all are also capable of trusting that that first action will lead y'all to 50 other actions. And there is the pre-work of deciding, you know, like I said before, how are we going to take care of one another in that work? That'll be messy and uncover lots of things, but give us also opportunities to make new pathways for ourselves and this community. Well, we're at the end of our time together. I want to make space for your closing. I already sent the homework to Swami Ramananda. So it's 3 short things to check out, but just, you know, for your own awareness. Next time will be really you all working together in breakout groups to come up with some ideas, and us spending a portion of that time kind of slimming those ideas down a bit so that you all can then take it and start to think about how you want to do that work together, what it looks like to investigate like hierarchies within y'all's ecosystem, and how you can be more expansive and working collaboratively. That's going to be necessary. Right. And so, yeah, that's mainly what we'll be spending our time doing. So it's great if the most amount of people can come so that we can have the most amount of voices in the room to like lend. So, you know, and I understand also that now everybody can be present because of the time and the commitment of time that it takes each time. But you can still be coming up with ideas on your own to pass to others to bring to the group, right? To be discussed. And we'll spend time at the beginning talking about like hierarchies and how they are counter to the liberation work that you want to do. It oppresses the person who's at the top as well as all the people along the way too. Create some realistic boundaries, basically, for everybody. But if you can think more of your work as like circular and everybody working together, this creates a ebb and flow where people are allowed to be whole while also engaging in really important work. And that's, yeah, it's pivotal for that to be sustainable. Okay. Thank you so much for your continued trust and engagement.
Thank you,
I truly
Kelley.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Much appreciated. I'm actually
Thank you.
I'm a little bit discouraged by the gradual decline in attendance from the beginning. It feels like we're getting fewer and fewer people. Let's see if I can stress the importance of being here, not just listening to the recording, being here together.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that conversation and also think about it too in terms of it's a long commitment, right? To agree to come on Zoom, particularly like for you all, it's not necessarily super late, but like it's super late for me too. So I could see why someone might choose not to be present and watch the recording. So I don't want to make a hierarchy about that. What I would say is it's increasingly important for everyone in your community to hold that the work that you all are choosing to do isn't stopping, even if only 5 of you are engaging. Because people are going to disengage for different reasons or appear to disengage for different reasons. And can you even create the knowing that if for health reasons, socio-emotional reasons, shame reasons, you fall out, we still are holding a space for you to always fall back into it. And more than that, you can tell us individually, all of us together can talk about how we're struggling so people don't feel like they're not doing enough or no one else cares or it's too hard, because it is hard. And, that
Good.
makes you all's work together more sustainable.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Cool.
thank you all. I hope you all rest well and nourish yourselves well, and I'll see you all in March.
You also, Kelly, please get some rest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do a closing chant together. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. Jai Sri Satguru Maharaj Ki Jai.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.